The emergency broadcast had been looping for 3 days straight when Marcus Johnson finally decided to stop listening. He sat in the dimmed control room of radio station KPXR, watching the red recording light blink rhythmically in the darkness, a metronome counting down to what felt like the end of everything. Outside, downtown Seattle had transformed into a nightmare of abandoned vehicles, shattered storefronts, and shadows that moved with unnatural, jerking motions. Marcus ran his calloused hand over his beard, eyes fixed on the wall of monitors displaying security camera feeds from across the city. Each screen told the same story: the infected were everywhere and they were relentless. He'd been a radio engineer for 15 years, spending countless lonely nights in this same chair, but he'd never imagined his voice would become a lifeline for the scattered survivors trying to navigate the chaos below. 3 days ago, Marcus had been preparing his usual overnight playlist of classic rock and talk shows. Then the first reports came through. A violent outbreak at Harborview Medical Center. Patients attacking staff. The infection spreading faster than anyone could contain. Within hours, the city's emergency services were overwhelmed. Within a day, the government stopped responding altogether. Now Marcus broadcasts survival tips, safe routes, and coordinates for potential shelter locations to anyone still listening. His gravelly voice had become a beacon of hope, though he felt anything but hopeful himself. The static on Channel 7 crackled to life, pulling Marcus from his thoughts. A woman's voice broke through, desperate and breathless. "This is Rebecca Torres. I'm trapped in the Westlake Shopping Center with approximately 20 survivors, including children. We're on the 3rd floor northwest corner. The lower levels are completely overrun. We've barricaded the escalators, but they're breaking through. If anyone can hear this, we need immediate extraction." We have maybe 2 hours before. The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by the hollow hiss of dead air. Marcus lunged forward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He switched frequencies frantically, trying to re-establish contact. "Rebecca, this is Marcus at KPXR. I copy your location. Can you hear me? Rebecca?" Nothing. He slammed his fist against the console, sending a half-empty coffee cup clattering to the floor. 20 people. Children. 2 hours. He grabbed the station map, marking the Westlake Shopping Center with a red pen that trembled slightly in his grip. He'd been coordinating rescues remotely for days, guiding survivors to each other, helping them form groups strong enough to make it to the evacuation zones the military had established outside the city. But this felt different. More urgent. More personal. Marcus was about to broadcast Rebecca's coordinates when movement on Monitor 4 caught his attention. 3 figures were approaching the radio station's ground-level entrance. He zoomed in, his breath catching in his throat. They weren't infected. The leader was a tall African-American woman with short-cropped hair, moving with the confident precision of someone with military training. She carried a rifle slung across her back and was signaling to her companions. A younger man with sandy brown hair wearing a paramedic's uniform, and a teenage girl with a baseball bat gripped tightly in both hands. The woman looked directly up at the security camera and held up a handwritten sign. "We heard your broadcast. Let US help. Lieutenant Diana Wright, National Guard." Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 72 hours, a spark of genuine hope. He grabbed his keys and rushed toward the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time down to the reinforced security door. His hands fumbled with the locks, adrenaline making his fingers clumsy. When he finally pulled the door open, Diana Wright stepped inside first, quickly followed by her companions. Up close, Marcus could see the exhaustion etched into their faces, the dried blood on their clothes, the haunted look in their eyes that he recognized from his own reflection. "Marcus Johnson?" Diana asked, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, grounding. "We've been listening to your broadcasts. You've saved a lot of lives these past few days." Marcus nodded, releasing her hand. "There's no time for thanks. I just received a distress call. 20 survivors, including kids, trapped at Westlake Shopping Center. They've got maybe 2 hours before the infected break through their barricades." The young paramedic, who introduced himself as Tyler Reed, stepped forward. "That's 4 miles from here through the densest part of downtown. The streets are completely compromised." The teenage girl, Amanda Foster, shifted her baseball bat nervously. "So what do we do? We can't just leave them there." Diana's jaw tightened with determination. She looked at Marcus, then at her companions, and finally back toward the door where the infected city waited. "No," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of command and an unshakable resolve. "We can't. Gear up. We leave in 10 minutes. The streets of downtown Seattle looked like a war zone bathed in the sickly orange glow of distant fires. Marcus led the group through the radio station's back entrance, emerging into an alley that reeked of decay and something worse, something primal that made his instincts scream to retreat back inside. Diana moved beside him with practiced efficiency, her rifle raised and ready, sweeping every shadow with trained precision. Tyler carried a medical pack that looked almost as heavy as he was, while Amanda gripped her baseball bat so tightly her knuckles had gone white. They'd spent the last 10 minutes in the station preparing for what Diana called a tactical extraction, though Marcus suspected it was just a military term for running headfirst into hell and hoping to come back alive. He traded his comfortable engineer's life for a crowbar and a worn backpack filled with supplies, feeling woefully unprepared for what lay ahead. Diana had insisted he stay behind, but Marcus refused. These were his people, survivors he'd been guiding through his broadcasts, and he wouldn't coordinate their rescue from the safety of his booth while others risked everything. They moved in single file down the alley, Diana at point, Marcus behind her, then Tyler, with Amanda covering their rear despite her young age. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of car alarms and the occasional inhuman shriek that echoed between the buildings. Marcus had learned to distinguish between different types of infected over the past 3 days. The fresh ones were fast, aggressive, still retaining some of their human agility. The older ones moved slower but were no less dangerous, their bodies deteriorating but their hunger somehow growing more intense. Then there were the ones Diana called alphas, infected that seemed to coordinate the others, displaying an intelligence that terrified Marcus more than anything else about this nightmare. They reached the intersection of 4th Avenue, and Diana raised her fist, signaling everyone to stop. Marcus pressed himself against the cold brick wall, his heart thundering in his ears. Across the street, at least 30 infected wandered aimlessly through an abandoned parking lot, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some wore business suits, others hospital gowns or torn uniforms. One had been a police officer, its badge still glinting in the firelight. Marcus forced himself to remember these had been people once, with families and dreams and lives that mattered, but when one of them turned in their direction, its milky eyes searching blindly, all he could see was the monster it had become. Diana leaned close, her whisper barely audible. "We go around. Through the metro tunnel entrance, half a block east. It'll add 10 minutes, but it's safer than trying to cross here." They backtracked silently, every step calculated and deliberate. The metro entrance yawned before them like an open mouth, the escalators leading down into absolute darkness. Tyler pulled out a flashlight, and Diana immediately pushed his hand down. "No light unless absolutely necessary. It attracts them." They descended into the tunnel and the darkness swallowed them whole. Marcus had never experienced such complete absence of light. He kept one hand on Diana's shoulder, feeling Tyler's grip on his own backpack. They moved like a human chain through the underground, their footsteps echoing off tile walls. The air was stale and thick, carrying the copper smell of blood and something rotting. Marcus tried not to think about what might be down here with them, tried to focus on putting one foot in front of the other, but then he heard it, breathing that wasn't theirs, somewhere in the darkness ahead. Diana stopped so suddenly Marcus nearly collided with her. The breathing grew louder, accompanied by a wet, dragging sound. Something was moving toward them through the tunnel. Marcus felt Diana's muscles tense beneath his hand, heard the subtle click of her releasing her rifle's safety. Tyler's grip on his backpack tightened painfully. The dragging sound came closer, closer, and then Tyler's flashlight blazed to life, flooding the tunnel with harsh white light. What Marcus saw in that moment would haunt him forever. The infected metro worker lurched toward them, its jaw hanging at an unnatural angle, its transit uniform soaked with dark stains. But it wasn't alone. Behind it, illuminated by Tyler's shaking flashlight, dozens of infected turned toward the light source, their collective moan rising to a deafening crescendo that filled the tunnel like a tidal wave of hunger. Diana's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and commanding. "Run. Now." They ran blindly through the darkness, Tyler's flashlight bouncing wildly as the horde surged after them. Marcus could hear them gaining ground, their footsteps and moans creating a symphony of terror. Ahead, he saw the faint outline of another exit, a stairway leading up to street level. They were going to make it. They had to make it. Then Amanda screamed and everything changed. Amanda's scream pierced through the tunnel as one of the infected grabbed her ankle, pulling her down hard against the concrete. Marcus spun around, his crowbar already swinging in a wide arc that connected with the creature's skull with a sickening crack. The infected released Amanda, but others were right behind it, pouring toward them like a flood of rotting flesh and gnashing teeth. Diana fired 3 precise shots, each one dropping an infected, buying them precious seconds. Tyler grabbed Amanda's arm, hauling her to her feet even as she favored her injured ankle. They scrambled up the stairs toward street level, the horde's moans echoing behind them like the howls of damned souls. Marcus emerged first into the gray morning light, gasping for air that didn't taste like death and decay. They'd lost valuable time in the tunnel, and by his estimate, Rebecca and her group had maybe 90 minutes left before the barricades at Westlake failed completely. Diana pulled out a folded map, tracing their route with a dirt-streaked finger while keeping one eye on the metro entrance where shadows writhed and twisted. Amanda leaned against Tyler, who was examining her ankle with practiced efficiency. The girl's face was pale but determined, and she hadn't let go of her baseball bat despite the terror Marcus could see trembling through her body. 2 more blocks, Diana announced, refolding the map. We cut through the Pioneer Square district across the plaza, and we're at Westlake's service entrance. Marcus knew Pioneer Square well. The historic district with its narrow streets and tight corners would provide cover, but it was also a maze where infected could come from any direction. Tyler finished wrapping Amanda's ankle and looked up grimly. She can walk but not quickly. We need to adjust our pace. Diana's expression softened slightly as she looked at the teenage girl. Amanda, no one would blame you if you wanted to wait here, find somewhere safe to hide until we come back. Amanda's response was immediate and fierce. Those people have kids my age trapped up there. I'm not hiding while they die. I can keep up. Something in her voice reminded Marcus why they were fighting, why surrender wasn't an option. These weren't trained soldiers or hardened survivors. They were ordinary people who'd found extraordinary courage when the world fell apart. They were proof that humanity was worth saving. They moved into Pioneer Square, and the devastation was somehow worse in daylight. Bodies lay in the streets, some infected, some not, and Marcus forced himself not to look too closely at any of them. A child's backpack lay abandoned near a fountain that still ran with water, now tinted red. Store windows gaped like missing teeth, their contents scattered and looted. Somewhere a phone rang endlessly, a reminder of a world that no longer existed. They were halfway across the plaza when Marcus noticed the silence. No car alarms, no distant screams, no moans from infected. Just oppressive, unnatural quiet that made his skin crawl. Diana noticed it too. She raised her fist again, halting their progress, her eyes scanning the surrounding buildings with increasing alarm. Tyler whispered urgently, "What is it? What's wrong?" Diana's answer came slowly, each word heavy with dread. "They're hunting. When they go quiet like this, it means they're coordinating. There's an alpha nearby." As if summoned by her words, a figure emerged from the department store across the plaza. It had been a man once, tall and broad-shouldered, but the infection had changed it into something more. Its movements were fluid, purposeful, and its eyes, though clouded, seemed to focus on them with disturbing intelligence. The alpha opened its mouth and released a long, warbling cry that raised every hair on Marcus's neck. The response was immediate. Infected poured from buildings, alleys, and doorways, at least 50 of them, moving with unified purpose toward the group. They were surrounded. Diana's military training took over instantly. Circular formation. Watch every angle. They pressed together, backs facing inward, as the infected closed in from all sides. Marcus gripped his crowbar, his breath coming in short gasps. This was it. They'd never make it to Westlake now. Rebecca and the others would die, and so would they. But then Tyler shouted, pointing toward a parking garage across the plaza. "There. The entrance ramp. If we can reach it, we can funnel them, limit their numbers." It was desperate, maybe impossible, but it was their only chance. Diana nodded sharply. "On my mark, we break north and run for that garage. Stay tight, stay together." Mark. They exploded into motion, sprinting across the plaza as the infected horde surged after them. Marcus ran harder than he'd ever run in his life, Amanda limping but keeping pace, Tyler and Diana providing covering fire. The garage entrance loomed ahead, and beyond it, Marcus could see something that made his heart leap. A military transport vehicle, abandoned but intact, its keys still dangling from the ignition. Diana reached the military transport first, yanking the driver's door open while Marcus and Tyler laid down cover fire to keep the infected at bay. Amanda dove into the back, her baseball bat clattering against the metal floor. The vehicle was a heavy-duty troop carrier, armored and imposing, exactly what they needed to punch through the crowded streets to Westlake. Marcus slammed his door shut just as an infected crashed against the window, its rotting hands leaving streaks across the reinforced glass. Diana turned the key and the engine roared to life with a powerful rumble that seemed to enrage the horde even more. They swarmed the transport from all sides, pounding against the metal hull, climbing onto the hood, their collective weight making the vehicle rock on its suspension. Diana threw the transport into reverse, sending several infected tumbling to the pavement, then shifted gears and stomped on the accelerator. The transport lurched forward, plowing through the mass of bodies with terrible momentum. Marcus gripped the dashboard, forcing himself not to look away as the vehicle carved a brutal path through the horde. This was survival now. This was what the world had become. They burst from the parking garage onto Pine Street, infected still clinging to the roof and sides of the transport. Tyler climbed into the back with Amanda, opening a roof hatch and using a combat knife to force the creatures off one by one. Their inhuman shrieks filled the air as they fell away, tumbling across the asphalt. Diana drove with fierce concentration, weaving between abandoned cars and debris, the transport's heavy frame crushing anything too large to avoid. Marcus watched the street signs flash past, counting down the blocks to Westlake Shopping Center. They were close now, so close, but his radio crackled with static and then Rebecca's voice emerged again, weaker this time, touched with desperation that made his chest tighten. "This is Rebecca Torres. If anyone can hear this, we're down to minutes now. The barricades are failing. The infected are breaking through on the east side. We're moving everyone to the rooftop. We have children here, elderly people who can't climb. Please, if anyone is out there, we're running out of time." Marcus grabbed the radio handset, keying the transmission. "Rebecca, this is Marcus from KPXR. We're 30 seconds from your location. Get everyone to the northwest corner of the roof. We're coming in hot and we're coming in loud. Be ready to move fast." The silence that followed felt like an eternity, then Rebecca's voice came back, trembling with disbelief and hope. "You're really coming? You're actually coming for us." Diana answered for all of them, her voice carrying absolute conviction. "Nobody gets left behind. Not today. Not while we're still breathing." Westlake Shopping Center materialized ahead, a 3-story structure surrounded by a writhing sea of infected. They'd completely overrun the ground floor, and Marcus could see them climbing over each other to reach the upper levels, driven by the scent of living prey. The barricaded escalators were barely holding, infected throwing themselves against the makeshift barriers with mindless determination. Diana circled the building once, assessing the situation with tactical precision. "There," she pointed to a fire escape on the northwest corner, exactly where she'd told Rebecca to gather the survivors. "We get beneath it, they can climb down onto the transport roof. Tyler, Amanda, you'll help them inside. Marcus, you're with me providing cover." She drove the transport directly into the thickest part of the horde, the heavy vehicle crushing infected beneath its wheels and ramming others aside. The impact was tremendous, bodies flying in every direction, but Diana kept the accelerator floored until they were positioned directly under the fire escape. Marcus could see faces peering down from the roof now, 20 terrified people who'd been certain they would die today. Rebecca was among them, a woman in her 40s with determination written across her features despite the fear in her eyes. She began organizing the survivors, helping children toward the fire escape ladder. Diana and Marcus jumped out, immediately engaging the infected that swarmed toward them. Marcus's crowbar rose and fell in a rhythm he'd never imagined himself capable of, each impact jarring his arms but driving back the relentless creatures. Diana's rifle cracked steadily, each shot precise and controlled. Tyler emerged through the roof hatch, reaching up to help the first survivor, a young boy no more than 8 years old, down onto the transport. The child was crying, terrified, but Tyler's calm voice and gentle hands guided him safely inside. One by one the survivors descended. An elderly man who needed support on both sides. A pregnant woman moving carefully down each rung. 2 teenage boys who climbed down quickly then immediately helped others. A woman clutching an infant wrapped in a blood-stained blanket. Marcus lost track of time, focused only on keeping the infected away from the transport, his muscles screaming with exhaustion. Then Rebecca's voice called down, "That's everyone. We're clear." But as Marcus turned to climb back into the vehicle, he saw something that made his blood run cold. The Alpha from Pioneer Square stood atop an abandoned bus 50 yards away, watching them with those terrible, intelligent eyes, and behind it, a horde of at least 200 infected began moving toward them with unified, purposeful intent. Diana saw the Alpha at the same moment Marcus did, and her tactical mind immediately calculated odds that were impossibly grim. 200 infected against a transport vehicle carrying 24 people, low on ammunition, with fuel that wouldn't last forever. She shoved Marcus toward the transport door, her voice sharp with command. "Get inside. Now." They scrambled into the vehicle as the horde began its coordinated advance, moving faster than any group of infected they'd encountered before. The Alpha's influence was undeniable, transforming mindless monsters into something that resembled a military formation. Diana slammed the vehicle into gear and punched the accelerator, but the transport was heavy, overloaded with survivors, and its acceleration was agonizingly slow. The infected closed the gap quickly, their moans rising to a deafening crescendo that made the children in the back compartment cry out in terror. Rebecca held the infant close, whispering prayers or reassurances, Marcus couldn't tell which. Tyler braced himself against the wall, keeping the elderly man from being thrown around as Diana took a hard corner. Amanda had her arms around the young boy they'd rescued first, her baseball bat lying forgotten at her feet. The Alpha leaped from the bus onto the roof of a delivery van, then to a taxi cab, closing the distance with frightening agility. It was hurting them, Marcus realized with growing horror. Every turn Diana made seemed to push them exactly where the creature wanted them to go, toward narrow streets where their speed advantage would mean nothing. Diana saw it too. It's thinking, adapting. We can't outrun them, not with this much weight. Marcus grabbed the radio, desperately searching frequencies for any sign of military presence, evacuation centers, anyone who might provide support. Static filled most channels, but then he caught a fragment of transmission on a rarely used emergency band. Fort Lawton evacuation point, currently secure, all survivors proceed to. The signal dissolved into interference, but Marcus had heard enough. Fort Lawton, the old military base in the Magnolia neighborhood, roughly 3 miles northwest of their current position. He relayed the information to Diana, who nodded grimly. 3 miles through infected territory with an Alpha coordinating against us. We'll never make it at this pace. She was right, and they all knew it. The transport could handle the smaller groups they'd been plowing through, but 200 infected could swarm them, could tip the vehicle, could tear through even reinforced doors given enough time and numbers. Then Rebecca spoke up from the back, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The construction site on Denny Way. The new high-rise they were building before everything fell apart. It has a crane, heavy equipment, narrow access points. We could make a stand there, thin their numbers. Tyler immediately grasped her thinking. Use the construction equipment as barriers, force them into kill zones where we have the advantage. It's risky, but it might work. Diana's jaw tightened as she weighed their options. Then she yanked the wheel hard, sending the transport careening toward Denny Way. Everyone hold on. This is going to get rough. The construction site emerged ahead, a skeletal framework of steel and concrete surrounded by a chain-link fence. Diana crashed through the fence without slowing, the transport's reinforced bumper tearing through the metal like paper. She positioned the vehicle at the center of the site, near a massive excavation pit that dropped 30 feet into darkness. The survivors poured out, and Rebecca immediately began organizing them with the efficiency of someone accustomed to crisis management. Anyone who can fight, grab whatever you can use as a weapon. Everyone else, get inside that construction office, barricade the door. Marcus found himself standing alongside people he'd only heard as voices on the radio, now united in desperate purpose. The 2 teenage boys, Jake and Christopher, armed themselves with lengths of rebar. The pregnant woman, Nicole, insisted on helping despite her condition, positioning herself near the office where she could defend the children if the lines broke. The elderly man, whose name was Walter, revealed he'd been a veteran and took up position with a nail gun they'd found in a toolbox. They had minutes at best before the horde arrived. Diana climbed into the cab of a massive bulldozer, familiarizing herself with the controls. Tyler and Amanda worked together to tip a cement mixer onto its side, creating a barrier that would funnel the infected toward predetermined points. Marcus helped Jake and Christopher string cable wire at neck height between support beams, creating deadly obstacles in the dim light. Then they heard it, the sound of 200 infected surging toward the construction site, and above the collective moaning, the Alpha's distinctive cry directing its forces. Diana started the bulldozer, its diesel engine roaring to life. Marcus gripped his crowbar, standing shoulder to shoulder with people who'd been strangers hours ago but were now brothers and sisters in survival. The first wave of infected crashed against their hastily constructed defenses, and the battle for their lives began in earnest. The Alpha watched from beyond the fence line, and Marcus could swear the creature was smiling. The infected slammed into their defenses like a tsunami of rotting flesh, and the construction site became a war zone illuminated by the rising sun. Diana bulldozed through the first wave, the massive blade catching dozens of infected and shoving them into the excavation pit where they tumbled into the darkness below. Marcus swung his crowbar in wide arcs, the cable wires doing brutal work as infected ran headlong into them in their mindless hunger. Jake and Christopher fought back-to-back with their rebar weapons, protecting each other with the fierce loyalty of brothers though they'd met only minutes ago. Tyler moved between positions, pulling people back when they were overwhelmed, his paramedic training making him acutely aware of everyone's physical limits. Amanda had reclaimed her baseball bat and fought with controlled fury, each swing more confident than the last. Walter's nail gun fired with methodical precision, and despite his age, his hands never shook. Rebecca coordinated their defense from an elevated position on a scaffolding platform, calling out warnings when infected broke through their lines. But for every creature they dropped, more seemed to take its place, and the Alpha still hadn't entered the fight. It remained beyond the fence, observing, learning, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Marcus understood with chilling clarity that they were being tested, their strengths and weaknesses catalogued by something that retained enough human intelligence to be truly dangerous. The Alpha's strategy became apparent when the horde suddenly split into 3 coordinated groups, attacking simultaneously from different angles. Diana couldn't cover all positions with the bulldozer. Their defenses began to crumble under the organized assault. An infected broke through near the construction office, and Nicole stepped forward despite her pregnancy, swinging a 2x4 with desperate strength that sent the creature sprawling. Christopher took a hit to the shoulder but Jake pulled him back before the infected could bite, Tyler immediately rushing over to check the wound. The fabric was torn but the skin beneath was unbroken. They'd gotten lucky. Then the Alpha moved and luck ran out. It vaulted the fence with inhuman grace and charged directly toward Diana's bulldozer. The creature was fast, faster than should have been possible, and it leaped onto the machine before Diana could react. She abandoned the cab just as the Alpha tore through the seat where she'd been sitting, its hands like claws ripping through reinforced padding. Marcus watched Diana hit the ground and roll, coming up with her rifle ready, but the Alpha was already moving again, using the infected horde as cover. It was hunting her specifically, recognizing her as the tactical leader. If Diana fell, their coordinated defense would collapse. Marcus made a decision born from 3 days of broadcasting hope to strangers, of believing that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. He grabbed a flare from the emergency kit in the transport, ignited it and ran directly toward the Alpha, screaming at the top of his lungs. The bright red flame and noise drew every infected eye toward him, including the Alpha's. The creature turned, focusing its attention on this new threat, and charged. Marcus stood his ground, crowbar ready, knowing he had seconds before impact. Then Diana's rifle cracked once, twice, 3 times. The shots took the Alpha in the chest and shoulder, staggering it. Tyler appeared from the side with a steel pipe, striking the creature's knee and bringing it down. Amanda was right behind him, her baseball bat connecting with the Alpha's skull in a devastating swing that would have made any major league proud. The Alpha fell and something changed in the remaining infected. Without the coordinating intelligence, they reverted to mindless individuals, easier to predict, easier to funnel and eliminate. The survivors fought with renewed determination, pushing the horde back, using every advantage the construction site offered. Diana was back in the bulldozer, systematically clearing sections. Rebecca's voice rang out, strong and steady, keeping everyone coordinated. Walter's nail gun never stopped firing. Jake and Christopher protected the vulnerable. Nicole guarded the children like a lioness. When the last infected finally fell, silence descended over the construction site, broken only by heavy breathing and the distant sound of helicopter rotors. Marcus looked up to see military choppers approaching from the north, and his radio crackled to life. "This is Fort Lawton Evacuation Command to any survivors in the downtown sector. We have your location. Extraction team inbound. Hold your position." Diana walked over to Marcus, exhausted but alive, and extended her hand once more. This time it wasn't a greeting but acknowledgement between equals who'd survived the impossible. Around them, 24 people stood battered but unbroken, strangers who'd become family in the crucible of survival. As the helicopters descended, Marcus looked at each face and saw what he'd been broadcasting about for 3 days. Proof that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't guns or barriers, but the refusal to give up, the courage to stand together, and the determination to fight for every single life. The infected had taken their world, but they hadn't taken their humanity. And that, Marcus realized, made them legends of a resistance that was only just beginning. The end.